for our purposes, say we just came into this software, we detected our hearing instrument. The very first thing that you want to do is go down here to your fitting options, high power and low power. These are the different receiver options that are available for our RIC products. If you were using a BTE, you would have ear hook or thin tube options available. You want to pick this first because it's going to affect everything. If you are using a low power receiver but you leave it on high power, when you do your auto fits, the software thinks you have a receiver that is actually doing 25 decibels louder than the receiver you actually have on is doing. So you want to make sure and pick this very first thing. I am using a high power receiver, so I want to leave that there. The other thing that you want to do, and once you pick it the first time, it'll be saved every time after that, unless you change what type of speaker you're using, then you have to manually change this again. So first thing, make sure your fitting options are correct. And that will be up here as well. When you change to low power, the readout that you have up here of what you're working with changes to low. When you change to high, it's back to high. So the second thing we want to do when we go in here is pick our number of memories, okay? If your patient isn't very mechanically inclined or you want to limit them, this is where you open this up and you can limit the patient to 1 memory if you like, 2, 3, or 4. For my purposes, I'm going to do this probably one of the more advanced ways. If my patient was, say, in their early 50s and pretty active, maybe still working, I would recommend giving the patient 3 memories, okay? You can cancel and close at any time. If you click apply and close, what you've done in here is going to be applied. You'll see up here swap to memories. You can also copy memories and restore memories. If I had a device connected and I was working with a patient that I had used before, I had saved a session, this is where I could restore those sessions. Those would be up in here. So at this point, we're just trying to pick our number of memories, though. So I pick 3 memories, and I click apply and close. I have my 3 memories here. Okay, what we want to do next is our input mode. We can see that Omni is picked here for an Omni microphone. I'm working with a product that actually has adaptive directionality, fixed directionality, and a telecoil. So for my very first program, I'm going to give the patient adaptive directionality. With directionality, you have these different directionality plots to choose from. And the way to think about it is your patient's head is right here in the center, and they're looking in this direction. So you can see the sound plume of where the directional microphones are enhancing the sound and cutting out the rest of the noise. Supercardioid is kind of a middle of the road. This is what we recommend to start off with. For spatial recognition reasons, it gives you a little bit of sound behind the head. The hypercardioid plot, believe it or not, is one of the better plots for a really noisy environment or like a loud party type environment. The way that the compression works together and the directional microphones adjust, it actually is the most recommended setting for a very noisy environment. But to start the patient out with, start on the supercardioid. And if the patient says when they come back in or for a checkup, they say, hey, I'm getting too much behind myself, you can always switch it to the cardioid and give them mostly frontal, mostly all frontal. But for starting point, we'll start with a supercardioid plot. Now, we want to auto-fit our first memory, and we want to do it to a general auto-fit setting. So by dropping this auto-fit to box and clicking general, the software applies a general auto-fit to this memory. So now we're going to go into our second memory. And maybe this memory is definitely a noisy memory, okay, for a noisy environment. Okay, we've already got everything else set, so we go down here to our input mode. And maybe we want to set this up for a fixed directional as opposed to adaptive directional. Adaptive directionality being the hearing aid will actually sense when it's more beneficial for the patient to be in directional mode, and it will automatically adjust into directional mode for the patient, okay? And when it's not more beneficial, it will stay in omni mode. Now for your noise mode, you could use adaptive directionality and it will work great. But if the patients, they work in a noisy environment or something, or they know they go out to dinner a lot and they're in a noisy environment, maybe you don't want the hearing aid adjusting so much and you just want to make it a fixed directionality, okay, for our second memory. And again, we get our plots. Now we know that this patient is usually in a pretty noisy environment, so give them the hypercardioid plot, okay? And again, this is more subjective to what the patient, the feedback you get from the patient, but a good starting point for a high noise environment is hyper. But this time when we auto-fit our second memory, we would either auto-fit probably to a moderate noise or a high noise auto-fit program. And what that does is it changes the compression ratios a little differently than a general noise environment to account for a noise situation. So I'm going to click on moderate noise here, and we've done a moderate noise auto-fit for the second memory. You can see the noise reduction is a step higher than it was in the first memory, okay? The reason I gave this patient a third memory is because this particular product comes with a telecoil in it, okay? So I'm going to put a telecoil in so the patient, when they're on the phone, has a telecoil setting. Usually telecoils you can almost leave unprogrammed at full on and they won't be too loud. But if you do want to apply some type of auto fit, what I recommend is using the music auto fit. Because a music auto fit traditionally has no compression at all, which you're not going to want any compression in a telecoil mode, okay? And now when you do this, you may want to give them more overall gain, just depending on what the patient says by the sound of the volume on the phone. At this point, we have auto-fit and adjusted our inputs on every memory that we want to program. So what I would suggest doing, when you make changes to a device, they will hear the changes while you change it on the screen here. But it's putting it into a short-term memory, okay? So if you were to unhook the aid or it loses power or anything, before this happens, you will lose everything you've done. So to lock it in, there are two ways. You can go up to Fitting Tools and click Program All Valid Sides. But rather than do that, what I recommend is when you're done programming, go up here to Save and Close. When you click Save and Close, what it's going to do is it's going to automatically save this session in your patient's record, and then it's going to bring up a little window that says, do you want to program the device at this time? And say yes. That is the same thing as going up here and doing it, but it does everything in one swoop by just hitting Save and Close. When it says, do you want to program the device, say yes, and then it will also ask you if you want to exit the application. You can say yes or no. That is the best way to finish. So if I click Save and Close, it saves my session. Since I do not have a hearing aid hooked up, it did not ask me if I want to program, but before this pops up, if you do have something hooked up, it will say, do you want to program the device? Just say yes there. At that point, you can unhook the aid, and it will keep anything that you have put in. If I want to exit, I'm going to say no. If you are doing your adjustments and you like what you've got, and maybe you have some more to do, but you just don't want to lose it for any reason, you can always go up here at any time and click Program All Valid Sides, and it is not going to save the session though or anything. You have to go up here to do that and save the session and close. Do I want to exit the application? Yes, and it is that easy to do your initial fit of the Vocal Labs fitting software. Thank you very much. I hope it was beneficial.